Hey guys.
Hi, how are you guys?
Yes. How you doing? Welcome to our new segment called OMD Reactions, or I guess
OMD Reactions.
Or it could be one more reaction.
I was gonna say one more reaction. That's why I was like hesitant there.
Yeah, no,
but either
fine.
way, it's our first OMD Reactions. What is that, honey?
Well, OMD Reactions is simply us reacting to things that we're interested in, whether it be a YouTube video, a series we're watching. We're going to get into books, but right now it'll probably just be visual entertainment that we're consuming.
Yeah.
And today, in particular, we want to react to Kirk Franklin's A Father's Day story. Right?
Yeah, and before we even talk about that, let me just tell you guys something. This is what my husband and I do every time we watch a movie or a documentary. That's one of the things I enjoy doing with him, is watch something and then talk about it later on. Whether it's a reality show, it's just fun, and we've been learning together in that way. So we thought, let's bring it to OMD.
Yes, and we appreciate, once again, as always, you guys watching and consuming the content that's dealing with marriage. But obviously, our lives are consumed with many other things outside of just the focus of our relationship, and it's fun. So we thought this would be fun, and we thought it would be definitely something that expresses how we feel about it. So without further ado, you want to hop right in?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So I will say that Kirk Franklin, to me, has been such a staple in the gospel industry for such a long time, to the point where even now he's been relevant since I've been just a young guy. Like, I think maybe he's been relevant since, don't quote me on this, audience, but I think he's been relevant since I was in like 6th and 7th grade, at least.
Wow.
I would say like 96, 97, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then I personally was introduced to a lot of his music in high school. How about you?
Kirk Franklin was probably introduced to me in high school, but through my older sister. My sister Daga, she had every CD. Even in her car, we would listen to Kirk Franklin. So when it came to gospel, I only knew Kirk Franklin.
Right. What's your favorite song?
Oh man, Better Days, Brighter Days,
Brighter Day.
That one, okay. You Don't Have to Worry. There's so many, and I would say You Don't Have to Worry was quite significant to me.
What album is that off of?
I wouldn't say Stomp. Is it actually an album called Stomp?
I think that album is called Revolution.
Revolution, yes. So yeah, I love Kirk Franklin, but obviously I'm not a major fan like you. But he's been significant in many ways in my life.
I believe her. Yeah.
I can share that later, but yeah.
And so I could go on and on about Kirk. I think he is just a phenomenal songwriter. I think he is a great showman, and it would be such an opportunity to kind of cross paths with him later on in life, or whenever in life. I mean, you know, it's just something about seeing a person who's passionate about their artistry, and so I think that's why even watching his story, the Father's Day documentary, has been so touching, because you feel like you have grown with this person. Even though he's older than us, there's a lot in his music that has allowed us to grow up, and for me, utilize it as the soundtrack to my life in a lot of ways, right?
I think you said it there. Soundtrack to your life. Because after this documentary, by the way, that we're going to talk about, I can say I get it now. I get why his music sounds like that. In college, when I was doing my master's, I failed accounting. I had to take it in English, and then went back to Chinese, and then went back to English, and I was just so devastated. And because of that, I remember listening to his concert, watching his concert. They were all wearing white. Under my covers, can you believe it? Under my covers with my laptop, watching and listening to that whole concert. And I was completely delivered from that incident. And I understand why he has that sound. And I hope if you really get to watch this documentary, you'll get where it's coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really great to connect and really get it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great share. That's an awesome thought. I mean, yeah, there's just so many instances, but let's get into it. So the documentary opens up with Kirk talking to the audience about kind of his life and where he's from. And from what I recall, in many interviews, a woman named Gertrude adopted him, right? And then after Gertrude adopted him, he kind of went through just different trials and tribulations in life, living as basically an adopted child who felt at times like an orphan.
Yeah.
That's from his words.
Yeah, pretty much all the time. Yeah. And when he mentioned what's difficult was he had parents that came to visit him, but then they would leave.
Twice a year.
That was more painful for him to experience that than someone who maybe was just adopted and they never even knew their parents.
Right.
So it really left a scar in his spirit and his heart because of that.
Yeah, and in that case, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it just also speaks to the importance of a nuclear family, a mother, father, and a child, or several children. So then from there, we're taken into the fact that he is showcasing or chronicling this experience. And when he started, you were laughing to yourself. You were like, he said, nothing can prepare me for what was to come in 2023. She's like, 2023, right?
Yeah, like isn't it now 2023?
Because we're so used to people having things in the can for 3 years, 4 years, and then they come out with a documentary. You know,
I have to say, Kirk, I'm talking to you like you're my friend. That was really brave of you.
So brave
to just be obedient and say, I'm gonna share this story right away.
So vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
And so I, as a fan, always appreciate behind the scenes by artists who are I love that. I love because I'm a musician. We're both musicians, and so a lot of times I'm trying to see and take notes, like I'm loving that studio. He had Isaac Curry. He had the gentleman from who's the other gentleman singer from Maverick?
How can I forget? He's on my Instagram. Chandler
Moore was there. These are the two gentlemen that we both follow respectively, and all of his wonderful singers who I always admire the different textures in their voices.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting goosebumps every time.
Right. So he was expressing to the audience that this was the first time in all these years he's been a huge gospel singer that he is going to showcase the behind the scenes. And it happened so that during all of these things that he's about to show you in the documentary, this album is being recorded. What a sacrifice.
That's a huge sacrifice. And how can you even focus on the songs when you're going through this pain at the same time?
I mean, I don't know how I could do it. I mean, sidebar, a lot of people say that about Mary J. Blige. They say, without her pain, we wouldn't get her music, right? So there's a lot that comes from artists. And as a songwriter myself, I know that sometimes there's songs that I haven't released yet that I'm like, should I? I'm married now, I have a kid. But somebody might need to understand what that emotion feels like that can't be expressed in just a conversation. They might need it in a song to maybe get them through to know that they're not alone in that feeling. Right? So. And
that's what Kirk mentioned in the beginning. In his foster home, there was this little piano outside that house, and that was his moment of just solace. Is that the word to use? Of peace, of joy, and even being closer to God. And that just makes sense why his chords, when he plays
those heavenly chords
in his music, you feel it. It's like a communication. It's a language. It's not just sound.
No.
That was really great to learn that and understand where it comes from.
And he said that was where he found his relationship with God, but as was one with the piano, if you should say. So what we are understanding from the beginning is that with that foundation and with that escape music, we're brought into modern day where he is experiencing all of the people who are surrounding him in his camp, his musical camp. And one lady in particular named Melody, she went to a family funeral, I believe. And a conversation started budding because I don't know if it was her father's friend or a friend of her father's spoke to the family. And this gentleman, his name is Rick Hubbard. And Rick said, I dated do you remember his mom's name?
Deborah.
Yes, thank you. I dated Deborah when I was a little boy. Now, we are introduced to Deborah later on, but she's not referred to early, but Deborah is Kirk Franklin's biological mother. And so because Deborah wasn't in his life like Gertrude was, she is not considered by his definition his mom who raised him. So she is his biological mom, and so he calls her by first. He calls her Deborah. And man, that conversation from Melody, thank God for Melody.
Melody is someone that is a childhood friend, was with Kirk Franklin, and they sing together in this ministry. And at 53, look at how many years he had to wait just to get the truth. At 53, he finds out through someone he works with and probably sees every day that his father is probably Rick. And everyone at the funerals looking at this man like, why does he have the same ears as Kirk? Same height, same nose.
Right.
And then what happened after that?
What happened after that is Kirk heard about it, and a rumor started kind of budding in the community.
Yeah, that's right.
And from there, Kirk's biological mom, Deborah, called Kirk, and she actually cited that she knows a rumor is going around. And she also promised him that she'd never lie to him about anything. Now, see, with the backstory with Kirk, if you follow him, you know that he's been talking about his adoptive family for years and how he didn't have a father, right? And Dwight Allen, I believe, please, I pray that that's the right name, Dwight, his first name is Dwight for sure. This man died in 2017 with the guilt that Kirk cites was from Kirk saying, you weren't there for me when I needed you. And he grew up hating him. And that's a heavy load to carry, especially for a man who didn't raise you but maybe knew. However, he's been told his whole life that Dwight was his father, his entire life. So this other rumor is kind of like what Kurt would categorize as kind of showbiz fodder. A lot of people say, oh, I'm Michael Jackson's son, I'm this person's son. You know, you hear that a lot of times. So of course, him being a mega superstar, why wouldn't he think people would come for ulterior motives?
And people have.
And they have. And he said that in the documentary. So from that conversation, Kirk was like, let me get down to the bottom of it, right?
Actually, he didn't. It was Rick. Kirk's biological father was like, you know what? Let me just stop this rumor. Let me send my what is it when you check
DNA test.
My DNA to Kirk, and let him find out, just to stop whatever this rumor is. So what does Kirk do?
Well, once he found out that Mr. Rick Hubbard did a DNA test on his own, Kirk planned an entire meeting with him. He had his team, he had his cameras. Obviously, he let him know, and he was on a quest to see if these things were true. But before all of that happened, we are greeted with a very emotional scene where Kirk is by a window in his beautiful palatial home, gorgeous home, with his lovely wife Tammy, and we are greeted with a conversation with his doctor or physician. And she is expressing to him that Rick is 99.999%, right? You can't get better than that.
And he's like, what? 99.99 what?
Right. And I could relate to that reaction. I don't even know if I could even cry at first, because I would just be like dumbfounded, like, wait, what, huh? Well, because in that moment, the heart-wrenching thing for me was the fact that his whole life was flipped upside down in that split second of thinking like, who am I? What am I? Whose am I?
Yeah, you know? Even if he's a believer, and you know the word says we're all adopted, we're God's sons and daughters, the fact that he was still carrying that burden even shows why it's so important to really have a father and a mother in a child's life.
Absolutely.
No matter what. Because it really does, I don't want to use the word haunt, but it really comes to steal and destroy your purpose. I
agree. And I think that they would agree with you, people who don't have one or the other. I feel like people learn to cope, but there's a void.
That's the word.
And so from there, he is just taken aback to the point where, you know, he's holding back tears, he's holding back profanity, he's holding back all of it. Like,
and Tammy's over there just comforting him.
and she's wiping back tears, and we're wiping back tears.
I couldn't. I was like drenched.
Let me tell you something. I watched this thing twice now. I watched it first by myself while I was up, and I was a wreck.
Yeah.
The many times, I'll tell you, each time I was a wreck, it was this moment where he was sitting on the couch and he said, my mama lied to me again. That is gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
And God bless Miss Deborah, and God bless anybody who has gone through different things in their lives and things are uncovered and they're not in the limelight and you know, they have their side and everybody else has their side. But obviously it's gut-wrenching to be the child in that situation because you just want, you didn't create you to be here, right? So you just want the truth. You just want whatever the truth is, right?
The truth shall set you free.
Shall set you free, right? So so before he gets to meeting Rick, we are shown Kirk expressing all that has happened with his hired singers, his band, you know,
his family.
Yeah, and I hate to say hired singers, but they are his family, and they do work with him, and they are, like, I know when you're in a band, they become like, that's your second family, and sometimes you see them more than your own.
You have to, right? You had to see them. How could you record beautiful songs without expressing what's really going on?
That's right.
You know, they had to be part of that journey too at that moment.
And I was so touched by the fact that he was that transparent because could you imagine if you have this big mega star, he goes into the studio and he's just like, he's distraught, but he's not telling anyone around him why, and then he's trying to express music that's supposed to speak to the hearts of man. How could he do that? He needs to be open and the wound needs to heal as he expresses and sings out and writes out all that he feels, you know. And it's such a lesson in how transparent and how authentic are you willing to be in order for other people to connect with you musically and sonically. That's a real thing that I think some artists forget, and they just want to get the hit, and then they're not willing to strip down to saying, well, why should I listen to you? What do you have to say? You know? So during that moment where he's expressing and showing the band his the fraternity results, he's crying and saying, I gotta meet this guy. I gotta meet this fella. And he's not, he's just going at it. He's just going through it, and I'm just feeling him. I'm like, brother, I feel you.
And he calls his mom, Deborah, at that moment.
Yes, thank you. You want to express that part?
He calls his mom, Deborah, to make an appointment to meet her as well. And when he calls, Deborah's sister picks up the phone.
That's right.
And Kirk Franklin's like...
What's her aunt? Who? Aunt Sandy? Sandra?
Oh, man.
Is it Aunt Sandra?
I think it's Aunt Sandra. Forgive us if
Forgive us if it's not Aunt Sandra. We'll put it in the...
So it's like Sandra, and she's like, who? And for a second, she's like, Aunt Sandra. He's like, that's right. Yes. What do you need? Right. So that already was showing how broken the family was and what he was coming from. But with a soft, tender heart, he was still willing to humble himself and connect and bring their truth out. You know, we don't know behind this scenes if he punched bags or broke things, but he still was going through this process with a humble heart, a loving heart, to get the truth out. So he was able to do that, and then he arrived.
Well, before he did that, because this is a part I don't want to miss. He inserts a part where he is singing a new song off his album coming out soon. This broke me because the lyric was, look, I'm gonna botch the lyrics a little bit, but I believe the lyrics are, I look at all the trophies that I've won. Oh, I trade all the trophies that I've won just to be somebody's son.
I give up every trophy that I've won just to be somebody's son.
I could cry right now thinking about that, because you think about all the materialistic ways that we look at life, and you look at the vulnerability that people have to just say, I would give it all up just to be loved. just to be loved.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. And I'm like waiting by bated breath to hear this song, but I was no good. I was just sitting in the room like, okay, like it was a rough thing to hear that. And you could see the little boy that we're introduced to.
He couldn't even say the words.
He couldn't say the words.
Choking.
And it's refreshing to see a grown masculine man, express himself in this way. I think that it's, as a black man, as a man in general, there's a lot that we don't see in media when it comes to vulnerability in men, and it's almost like it's shunned. It's unspoken, it's a bit shunned, but I think we're getting to the place where we have to realize that we are full humans. And we have all the emotions, and when we need to cry and we need to really express those emotions, those things have to come out some way. And if they don't come out in a violent way, and they don't come out in a way that is natural to you, they might manifest themselves in other things that you don't need them to. So it's important to really tap into that, even in your quiet time with God, I feel. So
and maybe that's why you even broke down, because here's a man, like he says, he has everything, but the only thing he desires he didn't have. And here you are listening to those lyrics and crying as well, and understanding, because you probably sometimes, I'm not saying you do, but wish you had what he has.
Oh, but you mean in the natural sense, like
natural,
the all the things. Sure.
You break down and you're like, no, but I do have what he does, and I have a father. I know my father. He's always been there.
And that's a great point you bring up. Yeah.
And it just breaks your heart in a good way too, and healing, because you could totally not look at your dad and want other things,
Well, yeah, or you could just, like you're saying, you could take it for granted.
Yeah.
I'll get into that more in a moment. I love the fact that I grew up with both of my parents, and it is just such a wonderful thing that I married somebody who also grew up with both her parents, and so that void is not within either one of us. No. And I think that those who don't have our story, I feel for you, because I think that there is healing. There's like a double time of healing that goes on, especially when either it was a tumultuous situation or a situation of death or whatever it is. There's a lot that comes with not having that extra balance. Yeah. And we are seeing it in our marriage each and every day. Like, wow, there's certain values we hold that allow us to stick together, where we're not making kind of frivolous mistakes all the time, because we know we've had an example.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of what you're speaking to, is like the value of that example. And yeah, sure, Kirk has the riches of the world, and I very much look up to him, and I look up to his ministry and what he's done. But I'm very sure that if he traded places with me in the department of having a father, he might just want to understand what that was like growing up, and you can't take that for granted. And it's not about comparing, it's just a lot of people might.
So speaking of father, he finally gets the chance to meet his biological father, Rick. And when he arrives, what happens?
You remember?
The Rick opens the door.
Wait. Before, I like little sequences, but I want her to tell that part.
Yeah, it's good that you
remember
that.
He was extremely nervous.
Oh man,
he made me feel like,
like he was just like, I was scratching everywhere. When you're nervous and you start becoming itchy everywhere because of being nervous. Right. I was experiencing the same thing. I'm crying already.
Yes.
He's in the car. He's losing words, and he arrives at this home, and you know what he says? He's like, wait a minute. My son used to play across the street from this neighborhood.
Right.
I used to be around here. Wow. And the fact that my father was that close.
But let's not forget this one detail. A few blocks away from the studio he's recording in.
It's like, that's the thing too, I mean, how I met you, God said he's around the corner. That was like 10 years before I actually met him, but God told me your husband's around the corner. And sometimes the very thing that you desire and you're purposed for,
up under your nose,
it's not far away.
Up under your nose, truly. Yeah, you were only a Facebook click away, so there's that. Here's the thing, you were going to tell the story about meeting his dad.
So yeah, he finally arrives, nervous as he was, and this man, Rick, opens the door and politely says, hello, my name is Rick. what's his last name?
Rick Hubbard.
Yeah,
he says, "Gentlemen, come in."
He says, "Gentlemen, come in."
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm watching, what is it? Phil from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Not Jeffrey, but the father.
Philip Banks?
Philip Banks.
Okay.
That's just like the kind of...
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, then what happens?
No, go on. No.
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
Fill me in. Come on.
So, yeah. What happens next is when they enter... Kirk is already in mid-conversation. And this conversation starts off by saying, in this small town where there was not a lot going on, there was never a moment where you, Mr. Rick, thought, there's a baby out there that's mine. There was never a conversation about a young girl who got pregnant in the neighborhood. And he said, basically, in a nutshell, if I would have known, I would have done something about it.
Yeah.
If I would have known, I would have done something about it. But that information was not given to me. Mm-hmm. And you remember the next part?
No, I don't.
So the next
I'm
part...
already crying here.
Oh, man. So the next part, Kirk is listening. And what's happening with Kirk is he's actually digesting what Mr. Rick is saying. He's like, wait, so you didn't know. So from the inner monologue I think Kirk is having is, so you didn't know, got to take that in, and I've been hating you, and you didn't know, so you didn't deserve the hate. So I'm sure that the little boy is even smaller inside.
Yet his face just wants to burst out with
Absolutely.
tears.
Absolutely.
Like, he couldn't even open his mouth. It was like, you know.
Yes. And I just need to speak to Mr. Rick. I feel like, sir, the way you carry yourself, man.
Such a gentle moment.
Such a consummate gentleman. Just the way that you opened your house to the cameras and Kirk. You didn't make this about you. And actually, that's what he said. He literally opened up saying, no matter what this outcome is, or dealing with the outcome, you are the focus.
Yeah.
You are the central focus. And he didn't say, well, I got a family and now you're coming all these years later.
And he's the one that sent the DNA results in the
he
first
wanted to get
place.
down to the bottom of it.
So
right?
he's a problem solver as well.
That's right.
He always focused on solutions.
Yeah.
But, while that was happening, Kirk takes the envelope and just gives it to him. He opens the envelope. I think less than 2 seconds. He just saw the result and he dropped the papers and he lost it. He was just fidgeting, thinking, what? He's probably thinking, I lost 53 years not knowing this. And he looked at Kirk. He started crying. And he says, I didn't know if I knew. If I knew, I could have done something. And as soon as he was saying that, I'm thinking, wow, they even have the same crying voice.
I see.
That's your father.
Yeah.
That's your son.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that moment. What got me in that moment is, like you said, when he dropped that paper, and I'm sure he saw that 99.9, and he was just like, world shift.
Yeah.
That broke me because I just thought, what is he thinking? He's probably like, I really need to find out what life is about now.
Yeah.
Even if he has other children, we weren't shown that in the documentary, but what does life mean now? I have a son, you have a father. How do we make these worlds mesh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it right now too.
Yeah. And so
about redeeming love.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kirk, smart guy, he planned it all in one day because he felt that he didn't want it to become a rumor or he say, she say. He wanted to go straight to his mother's house.
And before he went to his mother's house, one thing I won't forget is Kirk and Rick stood up.
Oh, right.
Rick was about to just freshen up because those emotions are a lot.
Yeah.
And it's in front of the camera.
That's right.
But Kirk said, before you go, I just need to hug you. I need a hug.
Right.
He is the son. He is the child. At that point, he's probably talking like that 10-year-old boy. But because of wisdom, I really felt like it was Christ-like.
It was God's grace that gave him that
said,
meaning to hug him.
Hold me. And as soon as they embraced each other, the healing started happening.
That's
the
right.
restoration. What they couldn't say through words, that really released God's healing.
And I believe they're both touched by God, because Rick's openness is just Christ-like.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my gosh. He was just so ready to, he said, come here, man. Like,
he held him tight.
The thing about Rick I love is that Rick really is just feeling for where Kirk is ready. And so because Kirk initiated it, he said, oh, come here.
Yeah.
He didn't go, just come here near my son.
You can tell that
and
too.
that's because the longing was there for Kirk.
Yeah.
And Kirk is also a man who has a family of his own. And he's just like, listen, I got to hug you no matter what, no matter if it's not the best hug, is what he said, right?
Yeah.
So in the next scene, Kirk is actually now headed to his mother's house, where she lives apparently with Aunt Sandra. And Aunt Sandra is now greeting him with, I come from a family that is Black, some of them from the South, some of them are from New York, but a lot of times there's these little, terms that people use, like get your behind in here, and basically that's the energy that Aunt Sandra had given Kirk, in approaching the house. But due to the circumstances, it didn't feel like the most appropriate way maybe to greet him, because we're told that they haven't really been in contact for over 23 years.
Yeah.
So that familiarity that once was is no longer, because it's such a strained relationship.
Yeah, so, it seems he understood his boundaries, because he said, I'm going to wait in the car until Deborah arrives as well.
Absolutely. And then he was asking Aunt Sandra to sign a consent form from the car, and she was telling him, no, I'll do it inside. And she respected his wishes that he'll wait till his mom gets there. And then she enters, or we're shown him hugging his mom when she arrived. And then he's on the couch expressing to them what he feels about love and how he sees love. You remember what happened here?
That he loves music. He's had to learn to love himself. That part, I was so busy just observing
the body
Deborah,
language. Yeah.
That part.
Right. Well,
I missed it.
Well, what happened in this part, and we will link the link in the description box here, but in that part, he then shares that because you didn't know what love was, I didn't know what love was. Because you didn't know how to love, I didn't know how to love. Because you didn't know how to love, I didn't know how to love my wife. I didn't know how to love, I believe he said, like friends, different people in his life. He did not know how to express love in a healthy way.
Yeah, he said he thought loved was to be liked. So wherever he was, he always wanted to be loved and accepted. That's right. In that space.
That's right.
He still felt alone even in that space.
Right. With all of that he had, right? Now, what's interesting is, remember earlier we said that Brother Dwight was the only father that Kirk knew, even though he didn't raise him. It was the story he was told. So when Kirk handed over the paper to Miss Deborah, she starts to chuckle. And Diva, you felt a way about that, right?
I mean, that chuckle to me was, and look at me chuckling now, it was so much, there was a lot of manipulation, there was such disbelief of truth, fighting truth, and basically it felt like another person suddenly arrived.
Why would you say manipulation?
Because their truth was right there. The papers he gave her was 99.9999, but she chuckled at that truth, meaning that everything that she had pushed away that was real and true in her life, she would probably laugh it off, and also it just felt like another person suddenly showed up to laugh at.
So basically, the manipulation is coming from the act of laughing, which is kind of a way
dismissing.
It's dismissing it to say, like, this is laughable. There's no way. You've got it wrong. The DNA is wrong.
Yeah.
And what I observed there is Sandra was a little bit softer. I think Sandra was taking it all in.
Yeah.
Because as her sister, she probably was like, I don't know if this is true. Either two things. She knew.
Okay, I don't want to.
She knew, right? You please. She knew, or it's new to her.
Yeah.
And I really don't think it's new to her.
I guess I would say the sister knew, because if you know your sibling, you share almost everything with them, and the things you don't even share, you know about, because you do life together.
Yeah.
So the way she was acting, her body language just showed that I think this is it. The truth is out. But because you're so used to playing the role of maybe protecting your sibling and being their, having their back, you were not going to quickly back away from that.
Yeah, yeah, that is an interesting observation.
They had like a
pact.
A pact.
I hear you. Do you feel like you do with your siblings in some ways?
No, I mean, I'm married to you, but I think when that's the thing too.
Yeah.
There's a role for siblings, but when you get into a marriage, it's a new ministry that the two cannot be put together.
So once Kirk's mom rejected the results of the DNA test, he then conducted a second test, and then were shown everyone, I believe, at a medical facility where they're going to be reading the results again with Mr. Rick, with Miss Deborah, with Mr. Rick's wife, and of course Aunt Sandra. Lo and behold, the results have not changed. And the beautiful speech that Mr. Rick gave, you can watch in the documentary, he's basically saying, you can do this at your own pace. At your pace, I will open my heart to you, and whoever else is in your life that you would like me to be introduced to, that you would like me to open up my heart to, that person's welcome as well. And at that point, we were just like, oh man, this guy, what a great guy. Yeah, what a great guy, right? So then at this point, did you want to take it away at this point?
No, I think, at this point, he leaves with his wife and then talks to his mom, Deborah. And they look at the results, and she continues to deny this truth. And Kirk simply just says, there is nothing, because of this deny, there's nothing that can make it up. No hug, no sugar, no joke, no nothing. Because she just wouldn't admit to the truth.
And it's what he said, I just need this thing from you. I need you to give me this.
Yeah. Period. Yeah.
Yeah, just give me this.
Wouldn't it be great if just both parents, if both parents agreed and they reconciled and then it's over? But no, it's like at 53, he finally knew who his father was, but at 53, he lost a mother. Maybe after the video, of course, that's going to change, but there just couldn't be two people coming together and saying, we're sorry, son.
Yeah.
That this happened to you.
Yeah, in that moment, he needed that family again.
Yeah.
And he only had half of it, and it was new.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. It's only God's strength that can get a person through something like that.
Yeah.
But one thing he said that was interesting that everyone can take from is, because she asked him, she said, will my denial put a strain on our relationship? And he said, yes. And he expressed to the audience in a voiceover, he basically said, because you can't give me this, I have to then deal with different things that I can, or reconfigure what I can give you. Now, we don't know what their dynamic is. We don't know what he means by that fully, but I think I have an understanding that there's a relationship there, even if it's strained. And that relationship might be monetary. It might be other different amenities that she's afforded. I mean, she has a beautiful big home, all these different things. I'm not saying that that's Kirk's doing, but we know that he's a superstar. So I'm sure he wouldn't have his family destitute. But in this case, it just made me think, wow, of all the ways that you can show forth love towards someone who's searching for truth, give me the full story and don't omit anything. And unfortunately, she couldn't give him that.
Yeah.
And she did say in that one moment, she's like, I've waited my whole life for this, and I still can't have you. And I don't know what she meant by that fully.
Yeah, I also didn't understand what it really meant.
Because after 23 years, that's a person's lifetime. I wonder if she's been waiting 23 years to be around her son and to have a sit down with him. And she's waited for that. and now it's falling through her fingers because she still can't have the solid relationship. So it seems like, this is just my theory. I think that Miss Deborah suffers potentially from self-sabotage.
Yeah.
I think that there are things that I'm observing just as a viewer, where if these things continuously put a strain on a relationship, what part are you partaking in that is causing that to constantly be at odds, where you can't find solace and peace with your adult son, who is willing to love you? What is that gap in the relationship? What is that wrench?
It's definitely, that's why when we pray for the full armor, we pray for the helmet of salvation. The enemy really loves to hijack the mind, and it just seemed right there that her mind was not connecting. I mean, her own sister said, he just wants to know the truth.
Right, and she said it so sincerely, and I love seeing that about her sister, because we were introduced to her sister kind of giving him a hard time on the phone and then giving him a hard time in front of the house, and then she just was like, listen.
She
was basically thinking about, I'm thinking about a song, Drop Our Defenses. That's a song, I believe, by Amy Grant. That's what love is for. And it's so appropriate, that song, because you got to drop your defenses. You got to be like, listen, I love you and I want what's best for you, and this is what I can give you if we can mutually love each other unconditionally with the agape love. But unfortunately that didn't happen there. And not to make the video too long, wrapping it up a little bit, once that situation was done, Kirk gave us such a gift by actually expressing to us that he needed to reconcile with his own eldest son. And now, as a gospel artist, we all know it is a no-no to have a child out of wedlock. So kudos to Kirk, because, Kirk continued on in this industry. He had a baby, Carry-On, I believe is his name. And Carry-On was with a young lady who I believe went to the church, but they were never married. So I believe Miss Tammy is his first, I don't know if it's his first wife, but it has been his wife for several years with children that they have together. But Carry-On is his only child outside of this marriage. And Carry-On has been on different shows. They've had different things. There was an incident when there was a phone call exposed and there was profanity thrown. And so that made people look differently at Kirk, and at the end of the day, he's human, right? Everybody falls short, and everybody deserves, the gift of forgiveness by God. So Kirk was transparent with that, so it was only fitting that during this Father's Day documentary that he calls Father's Day, I believe the name of the album will be Father's Day, he meets with Carry-On, and he shows Carry-On the video of him learning that, Mr. Rick Hubbard is his father.
And his son said, I knew it. I've been waiting for this, waiting to know who his grandpa was and his father. He's been waiting for, how old is he? 23?
I don't think he's 23. He might be a little bit older than that, but yeah.
But the fact that he's been waiting for that truth as well. And they both kneeled on the floor and they embraced each other. And he was holding him like his little baby.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moment to see with father and son. And also because there's a lot of ways that the media can paint you. They've painted his son a certain way, and it's like, this is a grown man. This is a full human. Whatever kind of character you're trying to give him, that may not even be him. It might just be what is good for ratings. But in the truth of it, we continue to pray for Carry-On because we know that God is a healer, right? And so there's just no way that there's no reason why he can't have a relationship with his father. And that's what you could really see in that scene, and that was so beautiful. And thanks for showing that part. I didn't even know this story, but showing that part just made it possible that God is a redeeming father. And it held him, it held Kirk accountable, because you can say I'm a victim of all these things, and then not to show us that you're mending the relationship when you can on camera. Kudos to you, man. Kudos to you. And with that, mending relationships, I loved how he described the picture he took with his biological father, Rick. And the subsequent picture he wants to take, right? Yes, and just how so many people, I'll say Americans, Black Americans, who
have lost their fathers or their relatives, whether it's through trading slaves or just that brokenness that how the enemy just from the start wanted to break and separate. He could see a picture of all those people reuniting and being together in one photo.
Yeah, and I hope that happens. That he described it as Black excellence. He described it as, Black men coming together and really showing forth, beating the odds, essentially. Beating the odds of struggle, beating the odds of stereotypes. There's a lot of issues with fatherlessness in the Black community in America, and it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's something that I pray that as I am a new father, that when not just my daughter, hopefully more children and hopefully sons, I can be the exception to the rule. My father was, and just transparently, I've never experienced a grandfather in either side of my family. And I think that's why this really touched me, because you can't avoid how you're born, where you're born into, what circumstance you're born into. You're just born into it. So when I look at the stats and I see that there's a fatherless epidemic in the States when it comes to Black men especially, I'm not an exception to the rule when it comes to the two generations before me.
Yeah.
So even with 2 generations before me personally, there's a void. There is a void, and I can't deny it, because I see movies about grandpa, and I don't know what that means. I've called no one grandpa. And that is gut-wrenching. And for me, I don't just feel for me, I feel for both of my parents. And maybe one day they express it or not on camera. But for me, as a person who is now putting myself out there in the public, I can tell you that it makes a difference.
Yeah. I think this story opened a conversation for many families who have had that void, who have that same void as Kirk has. And, just the other day I was looking at family pictures. My older sister sent a picture of my great-grandfather. And she explained, he was from King Sopusa the second. And it made me realize why, we have this royal family tree. And as a joke, I said, now I know who Lilac looks like. Now, think about it. This is my great-granddad. But just understanding that connection in history and knowing where you come from really connects puzzles of understanding. Now I know why I'm like that. Now I know why people sometimes say to me, oh, you're so elegant. You give me this royalty vibe. It's because I come from that. So Kirk said one thing. He said, now I can live or understand where he's coming from. Life is now starting for him.
And life, I agree, life will make sense if you know where you're coming from. And it's just, it's also true in the spiritual sense. Whose are you? Are you God's? Do you belong to God? Is he governing your life? And all the other pieces will fall into place,
Yeah. Wow. What a reaction.
Yeah, it's definitely a deep reaction, because it was a deep story. We'll have other fun reactions, different shows we watch and different movies, but we just had to get up on camera and start this series because we were affected by it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I was like bawling.
Yeah.
So we thank you guys as always for joining us, and see you next time.
Yes, guys.
On One More Day.
And yes, guys, remember to subscribe, comment, and like, and hit that notification bell. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.